This pattern's a fairly generic olive, olive emerger, olive emerger imitation. The one I'm actually going to dress now though is a big version, so it's on a size 14 partridge, sedge and caddis. This will imitate March browns and also the large brook duns. But basically, if you were to alter the size of the hook, so if you were to go, this is fairly, it's not a big hook, but it's a long hook, which obviously works better than for a larger or longer fly such as the March brown and large brook dun. But if you were to use smaller curved shank, like essentially buzzer hooks or whatever, from a size 12 down to 18s or 20s, you're going to cover everything from large dark olives down to blue winged olives, medium olives, and so forth. So again, this one is going to be for the larger flies, but the same pattern will cover you for a myriad of different olives and hatches. So size 14 in the hook, in the vise here. I've got a 14 Ovivus in olive, and just going to start off just catching in the thread like so. The tail is going to be the good old Coq de Leon. So just going to be some of this. Don't go too heavy again with the amount of fibres. Around 6 or 7 is plenty. And I actually prefer a fairly short tail on this one. So measure it up. We're going to tie over this kind of tag, this bend here, but measure it up before catching it in. That's going to be fine. So pinch and loop, and then just take that thread down and over it there. What we do at this point is take that thread, turn around once underneath it just to kick it up, like so, and that's fine. Take your thread back up over these butt ends, and do tie over them because it's going to help the tapering of the fly. So don't kind of just snip them off, because what you'll end up with is a bump, and that bump, when you're creating the body, will probably displace anything you're using and actually mess up the body slightly. What we're using for the body on this one is a natural stripped peacock quill. Probably see it there. Great segmentation, natural segmentation. The light and dark just creates. You can use different colour stripped peacock quills, in fairness. So you can use. I do actually like a golden olive. Or just a standard olive as well, but just for the sake of this one and actually ease of access to the material, I'm using natural. Just catch that in by the tip and take it back down to where the Coq de Leon starts. Take your thread all the way back up. So a couple of things at this point. One being, sorry, just seeing an annoying little tag in there. You've got so a couple of quick tips. So with peacock quill can be quite brittle. A great tip from that perspective is to soak the peacock quill before tying it in. That actually makes it easier to work with and less brittle when you do tie it up. Again, it is quite a brittle fibre or feather, feather anyway. So you've got two options at this point. You can either super glue underneath, or put some super glue or UV resin over. I prefer the latter, quite simply because even if you do put super glue under, the teeth of the fish can still destroy the body. So I prefer to create a coating over rather than under. So take this up in touching turns. Just work it up. It's quite a long hook, so just get up as far as you can, and at a certain point you'll find, like I have now in fairness, you'll find that you run out of quill, What you then do is just take a few turns of your thread and catch it in with a hackle plier and take the rest, because essentially you won't be able to work it that finely with your fingers, but you will with a hackle plier. Just take it up. Again, this is a really long hook, so you will need the entire feather. Take that silk back up. Just take it right up as much as you can get out of one quill basically, and secure that off. Make sure to take your thread over what you've just secured in, and then you're safe to release. You can see that just beautiful natural segmentation all the way up. It's got a little bit of a butt section of that quill. It might just snap off in the hackle pliers, but I'm going to not risk that. I'm actually going to just snip it off. If I get it, there you go. So you can see there's a big section left to fill here, but that's fine. What we then do is I'm going to work with some opal mirage tinsel, fine, so small or medium. Fine or medium is perfect. I just had medium on the desk here, so I'm going to use that. What we then do is just catch that in, take it back to where that quill finished, and just do a couple of turns in there. Just take it down further than what you actually need, because what you're going to do then is just back tie over it until you've got to the point where you're happy with the amount that's showing through, and that's fine. So that's nice and secure, nice tapering to that body, and just that great segmentation. What we then do is take so now we're going to secure all of this with resin so that we're not going to get it destroyed after a single fish. So we're going to take a blob of resin and just spread that over the entire. It just needs a thin coat. It's a protective coat more than anything. Make sure you just cover it all. Make sure it just all gets that good coverage. Just don't go too heavy with the resin. Again, this is just a security blanket for that quill more than anything. Do take it over the tinsel as well. Again, that's a pretty fragile material, so anything that can get undone at this point, just cover it. Make sure not to take it over the coquelicon. You don't want that being trapped down. Okay, so that's good. So just blast that with a pen just to dry it out. This is a nice tack-free resin, and actually bonds really quickly too. So just blast that over it. And it's a thin layer, so it doesn't need that much in fairness. There you go, job done. Perfect. So next, so this is going to be in a shuttlecock style. So the wing is going to be CDC. And because it's again a fairly big fly but a fairly big hook as well, I'm actually going to utilize 3 CDC feathers. So remember the curvature of the feathers. So what I'm doing is stacking the feathers because they're different sizes. They're kind of medium to large feathers, but they do end at different points. So all I'm doing is just lining up these points. There's actually 2 feathers there already. Got 1 more to add. Again, I'm just stacking them in the same direction, so use that natural curvature and just stack them in. Okay, that's great. So I've got 3 feathers in there now, points finishing nicely in the same sort of interval. So what you want now, so you want to utilize that natural curvature. So what you don't want is for those feathers to stick down. You actually want it to kick up at the end. So what we're going to do is essentially it's going to be reversed. So we're going to start off by tying it down, because when this is then flipped over, you'll have those feathers pointing up. There's a bit of a guesswork at this point, because essentially you have to think, okay, how long is this going to be to flip back over? As a rule of thumb, just take it to roughly where the tail ends. So if you just align those two sections, so the tip of the CDC to the tip of the tail, it's roughly, you're roughly in the right ballpark. Switch fingers, pinch and loop, and tie that down. You can at this point test, so just by flipping that over and testing, yeah, I'm happy with that length. If you weren't, just take off a couple of turns and then just draw these butts back if it's too long. If it's too short, pull out the tabs. So that's just nicely secured there. Cut off the butt sections like so, and just tidy that down. Now it's just a dubbing for the thorax. I bet you can't guess what I'm going to use on the thorax. Bet you can't. Yep, it's the good old fox squirrel. So fox squirrel in that thorax. So I was going to take, you want a bit of a mixture of the underfur with the guard hairs. But again, it's just going to give you that nice buggy, leggy thorax. It doesn't need too much. But it's this section is the section that's going to sit in and on the surface film. So this is where you want that bugginess. Basically, you want the rest of the fly, that abdomen and tail, just dropping below the water surface, and then this sitting up on top. So don't dub it tightly. At this point, again, with fox squirrel, you can use some dubbing wax if you wanted to. I don't tend to bother, especially if you're using the underfur. It tends to dub quite easily. Just take that, just ball it up in that thorax basically, and then just take your thread the other side to the eye. You can just see that bugginess there. It's great, really is a great natural material. Yeah, there's a few natural materials that just get utilized so much in trout flies in general nowadays. You know, obviously your CDC, Coq de Leon, your stripped quills, pheasant tail, peacock, a lot of natural materials. If you have a handful of those materials, it serves you so well. They just get utilized in so many different patterns. If you haven't got fox squirrel, by the way, you can utilize hesia. So what we do now is we're going to draw these tips up and over, so to create that shuttlecock style. Same thing as I did the other day though with the loop wing emerger. Grab them by the tips, not by the base. When you're drawing them over, draw over from the tips. What that does is you get a lot of these little straggly ends of CDC, and we want them just protruding back over the fly. So just brush this forward, brush it forward, brush all those little loose CDC fibers, and then we just pinch and loop. Don't worry if it's not tight at this point. What you can do is just draw those CDC tips, and then you get a nice tight finish like that. So you can see all these loose ends here now. See all of the little particles of CDC, which are great because you want that. Again, it just adds to the bugginess, but all of these are again above that shank. What that means is that essentially most of this will drop under the surface, so this section will be under the surface and this will be in or on top of the surface. That's basically the fly finished. What I would then do though is just kick the CDC feathers back to give you an easy access to the eye, because that will enable you to tie them on easier, but also it kicks that CDC up slightly. And what that will also do is encourage that abdomen and the hook bend to drop under the water surface, which again is what you want. So now we're just going to whip finish, draw that CDC back so you've got a clear access to the eye, you're not trapping any loose fibres. A few turns, draw that in slowly. Job done. Clip off thread. Obviously, varnish, super glue, whatever the thread up in this section. But you can see how it's all kind of displayed out here on top. So imagine that all getting trapped in the surface film, and just that nice, like an emerging wing and stuff from the natural olive, or shuck basically. You can just see, and you can see that little bubble, that's pearl tinsel just in that thorax section. That looks great, just as that air bubble of the emerging insect. So there you go. But again, you can create that in different lengths, different types of hooks, just to give you a totally different presentation. But it's a great little pattern. So tie a few up and give them a go. Hope they bring you luck. Tight lines.